Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this afternoon's public lecture series we are running as part of the AHRC-funded project, Grief, a Study of Human Emotional Experience at the University of York. My name is Emily Hughes. I'm a postdoctoral research associate for this project, working alongside Matthew Ratcliffe, Louise Richardson, Becky Miller, and Eleanor Byrne. The overarching aim of this four-year project is to develop a detailed, wide-ranging and integrated account of what it is to experience grief. For updates on this project and upcoming talks, you can visit our website, griefyork.com, or follow us on social media with the Twitter handle @griefyork. Today, we are delighted to welcome Dennis Klass, Professor Emeritus at Webster University in Missouri, who will give a lecture on continuing bonds in bereavement. Dennis Klass received his PhD in the psychology of religion from the University of Chicago and has been active in the study of death, dying, and bereavement ever since. Especially well known for his pioneering research into continuing bonds in bereavement, Klass has published widely, including writing several books on parental grief and co-editing collections such as Continuing Bonds, New Understandings of Grief, and Continuing Bonds in Bereavement, New Directions in Research and Practice. This afternoon's lecture will run for approximately 1 hour, with half an hour afterwards for questions. At the conclusion of the talk, my colleague Becky Miller will field the questions. Please note that Professor Klass's talk will be recorded, but the recording will stop before question time. With that, I would like to warmly welcome Professor Klass to speak to us.
Thank you. It's wonderful to be here. Matthew and I were just talking for a few minutes. Wouldn't it be nice to be in York? It's one of the favorite places in the UK. I have wonderful memories of the Train Museum and wandering around the Minster and other places. And then the memory that's the strongest for me is I cannot remember which gate it was, because there's what, 8 gates through the wall into the center city. But all of a sudden I stood there and I just felt this incredible sense of familiarity. And a little while later, I realized that that was the model for a castle, a play castle that I had. It must have been 5 or 6 years old, because we left that house when I was 6.5 years old. And I don't remember it at our next house. So it's nice to be in York, even if it's this way. Let's start with full disclosure. I really screwed up trying to. I gotta get this out so I can. I need to get back to. There I go. I really messed up. I use PowerPoint all the time. I use Zoom for meetings. I couldn't combine the two. I thought I could, and then I couldn't. So what's happening now is my slides are being shown from York. My picture and my video and my voice is coming from Washington, near Washington, D.C. And every time I do this, they're going to change the slide. So if I start to do this, that means that I'm making a really serious point, but you know, I'll just wave. So that's what you're getting. I'm sorry. The first computer that came into our house when my kids were 8 and 10. Therefore, I never learned a thing, and they always did it. When they went away to university, I would just call them up, and they would take care of me. So to this day, when I'm having a little trouble with my computer now, I will go over and my grandson will take care of it. When I was a kid, people who were my age, we said that they were from the horse and buggy days. So was that an English expression, British expression? Anyway, it meant that they were before automobiles. I don't know what you call people like me now, so I'm sorry. Okay. We're talking about the continuing bonds model of grief. Several researchers developed the continuing bond models of grief at the same time. Do you all know Simon Rubin's 2-track model of bereavement? Okay, well, it's good. 50 Phyllis Silverman, who was my co-editor on the Continuing Bonds book, where we introduced the model, began a widow-to-widow program, a peer-to-peer program, and interviews with bereaved children. So Phyllis and I are essentially the co-creators of the model as it exists now. Tony Walter, I'm not sure where Tony is now. I think he's retired from Bath. And I'm not sure where he is now, but he's still very active. He and I have been corresponding for 30 years. And we've been together 4 times. So longest we were ever together is when Matthew was there at Copenhagen a year or so ago. You can read all of those folks on your own. I'm going to just talk about I'm just going to talk about my contribution and how it happened. The turning point in my career was when parents in a self-help group asked me to be an advisor as they formed a local chapter. You have compassionate friends in the UK. Are any of you familiar? I'm only seeing 4 or 5 of you. Have any of you any familiarity with that? What the important part from our point of view is that it is based on experiential knowledge. If you look at most of the concepts that we use, that the psychologists use in bereavement studies, they come from somewhere else. Freud's idea of decathexis came from his understanding of the male child's response to having to give up his mother because his father was going to kill him. You all know about it. You all know about Oedipus, right? So it came from there. It didn't come from study of bereaved people. In that article or that essay, Freud never mentions bereavement. He gives no example. And when his own daughter died, he did not use that to describe his own grief. And when her son died, his grandson died, he did not use any of that. So, and yet that kind of model that came from the Oedipus complex stuck with us for all these years. And I'll note in a couple of minutes, it's still with us. John Bowlby's model of grief, the attachment theory, that came from children separated from their parents, largely during the Blitz. Because then, that's what he was studying. Interestingly, he studied the children separated from their mothers or caregivers. He never studied the mothers separated from their children. Why is the child's experience more interesting than the adult's experience? But that's where that came from. The concept of trauma and grief came into psychological studies largely through the post-traumatic stress disorder, which got quickly into the official list of diagnosis. And that was not based on bereaved people. That was the new name we gave to a very old thing called combat fatigue in the Second World War and shell shock in the First World War. So that, it was about soldiers in traumatic situations. It was not about bereaved people. The advantage I had with the self-help group is that the group itself did not use any concepts from the social sciences or philosophy. They said it was based on their own experience, what in the literature is called experiential knowledge. Some of you might know Bruner on folk psychology. Is that okay? I'm getting a couple of nods, but it's a folk psychology. It's based on their own experience. I was asked to be a professional advisor. By and large, it's hard for people to get into those groups because they're suspicious of outsiders. If you haven't, as they say, been there, then you don't know what you're talking about. And I was able to be with them for 20 years. When I was trying to understand them, I just sat and I listened. It's ethnographic research, participant observation, grounded theory, whichever you like to talk about. I have a couple of essays on the method that I used. I just sat and listened, and you ask the question, you say, can I explain the phenomena in front of me? And the answer was using the theories available to me at the time in the research, the answer was I could only use the theories available to me by shoehorning the data in a way that didn't work. This is a real hand wave. Oh, there's the bereaved parents. Go to the next slide. But they ask philosophical questions. You want a really interesting question you can ask philosophically? Where was God when my child died? That question, that for bereaved parents and any people trying to understand them, that question reverberates through every thought you will ever have about what is the meaning of a child's death. Where was God when my child died? It didn't mean they stopped believing in God. It means that God let them down. He was supposed to be there. I know that you're supposed to say she for God now, but that's not the way they did it. They were old-fashioned. What was I to make of there was a meeting of just the fathers one time, and he was talking about his child when she was in the hospital with cancer. And at night, kind of just before she had sleep, she said, "Daddy, how does God decide who gets the miracles?" That's a good question. That's a very good question. Parenthood provides the meaning for daily living. And when that meaning is taken away, how do you live? How do you live? When a child represents the future, what will come after us? The parents used to say to each other, when a parent dies, we lose our past. When a child dies, we lose our, there I am, I found it. So parents, let's talk about the parents in the self-help group for a minute. Keep the next slide. They share their pain. They talk about being there. You guys can analyze that in terms of Dasein. I think Heidegger is mostly, if I understand him, which I don't very well. If I understand him, he's largely about my own experience of my own mortality. How that applies to our experience of other people's mortality, I'm not exactly sure. But their parents said only those who have been there can really understand. The group members have been there. It's about the relationship, and we need to, and how I can be that. One, my methodological problem was how I can be there as not having been there in the sense that they were. Okay, now. Parents share practical solutions to problems. I need to go on. Oh, that's okay. We skipped a slide, but it's okay. I'll catch up. They share there we go. Practical solutions to problems, ways of being in the world. What do you say to somebody when they ask you, how many children do you have? It's an interesting question for them because it's context dependent. And they work out very elaborate ways of talking about that. If it's somebody that I'm just in a commercial, like I'm trying to sell them something, or to help them with their computer problems at the help desk, I just tell them how many living children, because the other is gonna, if I tell them that I have a dead child, that's going to skew the relationship. But or I can say, well, I had 4 children. And if they pick up the had and ask, then I tell them. And if they back away, I put them into the we won't be close category. You see how that's going to work? What does it mean to have a child? They share and they validate their bonds with their children. Okay, now go to, and they do that in some really interesting rituals. Every meeting begins with going around the circle, and if there's 40 people there, that goes around a lot. Every meeting begins with going around the circle and saying their name and their child's name, how their child died, and how they're doing this week. At the end of 25 or 40 people saying that, it's a very, very, very quiet room. Saying the name of the children puts it into a very sacred space. If you want to be friends with a bereaved parent, say to them, tell me the name of your child and tell me about your child. Don't ever forget that. And always use the child's name when you talk about it, and you can help them. You can be there with them. They share pictures. The first time I think I really began to understand bereaved parenting was a night that everybody brought in a picture of their child, and they just sat around and, shared the pictures, and people would talk about, and I suppose now they wouldn't bring pictures, they'd all bring their phones, right? But at the end of the meeting in those days, they used to ask me to say a few words. They weren't quite sure of themselves, so Dr. Klass became kind of, the validator, and I was no, not yet, don't, I was scratch. So they were sharing these pictures, and they sat around for 90 minutes, clearly enjoying themselves, looking at pictures of each other's dead children and talking about it. And at the end of the meeting, they said, Dr. Klass, what would you like to say? What are you supposed to say to that? I had no words that could explain that. And so I just said what I felt. I said, now we know there's a lot of beautiful children in heaven. And that's when they let me in, because I got to know their kids. After that, okay, that's enough. Let's go to the next one. There's the highlight of the year is a holiday candlelight service. The first one was pretty small, about 100 people. Later, it got to about 900 people in a Jewish synagogue 3 weeks before Christmas. That was kind of interesting, in which they did an early use of PowerPoint. They put a picture of each kid on the screen as they say the name, and as the name is said, the parents stand up along with all the relatives they've brought. This is a way to include the kids in the winter holidays. They stand up and they light a candle. I remember the year that a children's choir then sang the Rainbow Connections, the Muppet song. Okay. They go on a cemetery tour. One of the groups organizes a cemetery. Standing by a child's grave is a really lonely. It's hard for me to still think about that. So they all they rent a van, they all get in, they go to each of the child's graves, and around the city that takes a little while, and at the grave they get acquainted with the child there, and the parent will make a little presentation. They're sometimes quite elaborate. They'll bring with it, in those days, was a handheld tape recorder, and play the child's favorite songs, or sometimes play a recording that they have made of the child. It's still sad, but it's not lonely, and that's what the self-help group does. Okay, next. And then they do at the national meetings and at the annual picnic, they do about a balloon release. You tie a note to the balloon and you send it up into the sky. I don't know where balloon messages go, but when they go there together, it feels stronger than when you send one balloon into the sky. Okay. Oh, there's my hand. So grief is a shared experience. Keep going. My child becomes our children have died. The shared bonds with the children become bonds between group members. Next slide, please. There's I can't find my hand. Oh, there it is. There's a song that one of the couples who was on the national board were both music teachers, and they wrote a song, and the song is our children live on in the love that we share. Now that's a very hard line to get to do a hermeneutic to, but the parents understood immediately. The bonds among the group were bonds that were also included their children, and so they did things like on the anniversary of the children's death or the children's birthday, they would send cards to each other. If some of you have any friends or friends of your parents who've had a child died, see what happens if if the anniversary of the child's death, you send a card and just say, "I'm thinking of you." You don't have to say. You don't have to say anything. You don't have to say. They also shared. They also shared. Solutions to the problem. We already talked about how many children you die. None of that could be explained by the theories of grief that were available to me at the time. The one that was really available was Freud. Show the slide that has a picture of Freud on it. the grief work hypothesis. Each single one of the memories and situations of expectancy which demonstrate the libido's attachment to the lost object is what is met with the verdict that the verdict of reality that the object no longer exists. That's Freud. Well, first of all, the parents did not think their children were objects, so that didn't speak to them. And furthermore, death does not mean that their child did not exist. Death ends a life. It does not end a relationship. A popular version, find the Kubler-Ross slide. The popular version was Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. I got into this thing in 1969 when I was an assistant in the famous seminar. Her book on death and dying that started this whole thing came out for the Christmas sales the year I was working with her. So, you know, the next year she was an international celebrity. But that was after I had stopped working. And so you've got this, you know, this here's all of the happy faces or happy and sad faces, and acceptance suddenly it's happy, as if, oh, the death is okay. No, it's not. A child's death is never okay, and living in a world where children die is not okay. I remember the first night that the bereaved parents met. I sat there trying to say, let me see, is this anger? Is this denial? Is this a bargaining? And I remember driving home that night and saying, well, that didn't work. Okay, let's go on. So if, where am I? What, for example, was I supposed to make of a poem that a mother wrote for the newsletter? My eyes strain to search my heart for distant memories, but your face fades as I reach out to you. All that remains are warm feelings and smiles, tears and glimpses of your love in the wake of your parting. If you can't make this earthly journey through time with me, will you then come along in my heart and wish me well? Try to do that one with Freud. Try to do that one with Bowlby. Try to do that with as grief is trauma. We needed a new theory. Well, if Western theories of grief didn't work, what did? And the answer turned out to be Japanese ancestor rituals. All right. Keep going. One more. This is my introduction to Japanese ancestor rituals. The person on the left, that's my wife. The woman in the far back is the waitress at a really nice resort that we went for a weekend. And the woman is Sachiko, and the man is Yushin. Those are the Gooses. They are both Buddhist priests. Sachiko became a Buddhist priest after their son died. Her son was alive when my son lived with them as a high school student for a summer exchange program. So my introduction to Buddhism. Give me another slide. They're Buddhist priests. You see the young woman on the right. That's Yumiko. Her high school graduation present was to come and live at our house in the United States for a year. She is now married. She's got 2 kids. One has a developmental disorder of some kind. And she is now the head priest at the temple in that form of Buddhism. Okay, one more. In that form of Buddhism, temples are hereditary since 1868. This is a group of women who do a special kind of chanting. They meet in the Kannon pavilion of the temple, and they're wonderful people. And they are at the end of the meeting doing what you do at everything time Japanese gather. They're having green tea, the hot water thing there, and it's a wonderful custom. Next slide. Ancestor rituals are an elaborate set of rituals supported. Ancestor worship is an elaborate set of rituals supported by sophisticated theory in which those who are living maintain personal emotional bonds to those who have died for 33 to 50 years, depending on the sect of Buddhism. Effectively, you do ancestor rituals in a kind of a sequence. They're different as the years go by, but as long as anybody personally remembers them, the ancestor rituals are said for them, and then it becomes a different thing. Ancestor, the picture of the people in black. Ancestor rituals begin with the reality of death. What you're seeing in front of you is a family gathered around the cremated remains of the person who has died. He was living a few days ago. Virtually all Japanese are cremated. There are hardly any body burials there. They bring the tray out. You can see that the form of the person is still in the tray. And so there they are looking at the form of the, it's in a human form. The bones have just drawn when the flesh was burned away. And with chopsticks, they pick up the pieces of the cremated remains, and they put them in an urn. Notice the woman on the right, far right, is tenderly holding the woman who has the chopsticks in her hand, probably a daughter supporting her mother while they're going through. By the time it's over, all of the bones will have been picked up. Everyone will have participated in the ritual. There is no way that you can say that ancestor rituals or maintaining the continuing bonds in Japan is a denial of death when that's the way you start. In the United States, we don't look at dead bodies. We embalm them and paint them up, and you say, doesn't she look good? And the answer is, give me the next slide. And the answer is, no, she doesn't look good. She's dead. But we have a denial of death in the beginning of our death rituals. This is how the Japanese started. And it takes a long time. Look at those are little pieces, and they're picked up one by one with chopsticks. This takes a long time. Everybody participates. Okay, let's go to the Butsudan, the next one. This is a Butsudan that's it's in the major household of every large family. The Japanese family is changing like everything, like everywhere else, but this is a traditional Butsudan. It's a Buddha altar in the house. Take a look at it. What you'll see is this is obviously for a holiday because they have the lantern song. Do you see the picture on the shelf? Do you see the picture of the man? And then behind the flowers, there's another picture. That's what the Butsudan is there for, is to remember those people. There are those red, they look like cake plates, but they're not. They're for altars. And you see the rice bowls there. Every morning, food is put out for the ancestors. And then the brass bowl in the middle is full of sand. It's for holding incense. The brass bowl on the right, on the red pillow, is a bell. There's there's a thing for hitting a mallet for hitting the bell, and the little tiny bell in the right hand corner. Those are sold in temples all over Japan. Apparently going to the temple had something to do that was important enough that they put that bell on the. Here's a different. Go to the next one. This is a different Butsudan. You can see it's arranged differently, but it's got the elements. It has the picture down below. It has the bell. It has other stuff. Next one. So at the core, ancestor ritual is an expression of a human community that cannot be separated by death. Next. This is a priest at the funeral. What's he doing? He's in front of the Butsudan, and he is installing the person in the Butsudan. The person used to be in their body. Where are they now? There are a lot of places, but his job here is to install. So when you do the rituals in front of the Butsudan, you are in the presence of the dead person. That, by the way, is a very recent picture. One of my neighbor's son is a filmmaker in Japan, and he took this to the funeral of a friend of his. Next. The living and the dead inhabit the same space, social space, even if their interactions are only in certain times and ritual occasions. Ancestor rituals next. And ancestor rituals seem very much to me like what I observed in the bereaved parents. Next, Bon, if you put the honorific on it, it's Obon, is a summer festival in which the dead come back for 3 days. This is a picture of a family of 16 people. 8 of them are living and 8 of them are dead. Each lantern represents someone for whom ancestor rituals are done. I don't know if you can see that closely, but the small person on the far left among the living people, she appears to me to have Down syndrome. Can you see the short arms and the face? So that, you know, this is a family like any other family. There are, I think, 3 generations of living people, and I don't know how many generations of dead people in that picture. Next, when the lanterns are lit, each lantern guides a spirit back home for the 3 days. Next, caring for ancestors is not simply an individual responsibility, but it's also a wider collectivity. Next, the holiday here, you know, this is just, you know, one side. This is just one slice of the place of the temple grounds where where there's a cemetery where the ancestors rituals are being done. So the community does it together. You're not alone in your grief in the traditional Japan. You're part of a community that is doing the same thing with you. You don't feel like you stand out like a sore thumb. You feel part of things. Next, the first candlelight service I attended after I got prepped in Japan, I thought, you know, the children really have come back to see their parents for a few minutes tonight. At the end of the service, at the end of Bon, the spirits are put in lanterns and on little boats and put out into the stream. And when the flame goes out, the spirit is returned to the other side, but they'll be back next year. I can still talk to them at the Butsudan. I can still talk to them other places. They still come in my dreams. They are an active part of my world. Next, we can talk about family graves. The flat stone there in the middle is when you take that off, there's a big opening, and all of the urns from that we saw them filling up with the chopsticks, they're all in there together. You're not buried in an individual grave. In the back, you see an incense burner, and there's some other stuff on there. Remember the board that was next to the priest? They're there in the back of the grave. They're there in the back of the grave, and on that board, the priest has when we stayed at the temple, Yushin spent hours writing calligraphy on these boards. It has a sutra, some of the Buddhist scriptures. It has the name of the person when they're living. It has the name of the person when they're dead. They get a special name when they're dead because they're on their way to Buddhahood. And at the top is shaped like a stupa. A stupa in Buddhism is a place where you keep a relic of the Buddha. In other words, that Buddhism is based on remembering the Buddha, and just as Christianity is based on remembering Jesus. And so, you know, it is of a piece. Next. So what do you do? What do you do when you're there? You pour water on the grave to cool the spirits. You burn incense. You leave an offering, usually food that they liked. We saw lots of cans of beer when we wandered through the graveyard, but carrot juice, other stuff. You know, it's about giving a present. Next. A new development since the 1960s is in ancestor rituals is Misuku Kuyu. Misuku means a child of the water. It's a stillborn or aborted or a child who dies as a neonate. Kuyu are rituals from the dead. Each statue represents one fetus or very young child The parents care for the child as best they can. Can you see how they've got the toys on them and they wrap them in shawls and they give them hats? I love the Mickey Mouse. And then Jizo, the Bodhisattva at the crossroads, the Bodhisattva that can go between the levels of suffering, cares for them in a way that they cannot. The children are not abandoned. There's no, and notice again that they're here. It's not like standing by the child's grave is a lonely experience. When you come here, you are in the presence of a lot of other Misikukuyu. There'll be other parents there when you go. Next slide. The statues come in a variety of styles, and there are some specialized statues that have thousands of these things. The statue itself has the face of a child, but the long ears indicate that it's and the way it's standing indicate that it's also a Buddha, so that it's a Buddha and a baby all at the same time. Next slide. She's visiting a sibling who died, but is still a member of the family. She's using Piaget's sensory motor knowing. Do they teach Piaget at all in philosophy these days? It's French structuralism on cognitive development. I find it very useful. I'll come back to it in a bit. I find it very useful because some people still have sensory motor knowing. It's like, a kid when it really wants to get acquainted with something, when he's really small, when he does, he puts it in his mouth. And that's the way they know. And that develops, Piaget says, all the way up to from concrete operations to formal operations to some kinds of ways of thinking which are even more abstract than that. Learning the Japanese rituals helped me to make sense of what I was seeing with the bereaved parents. Next, many other cultures have festivals in which the dead come back. This is Day of the Dead in Mexico, which is a combination of Mayan and Christian traditions. It is what All Saints Day was in Europe when the Spanish went and conquered there. Next, here's the rituals here's the vigil at the grave. That's an all-night ritual with food and all of that sort of thing. Next, all expressions and symbols of dying and grieving are used symbolically in the culture. Here's some symbols, the masks and the skull mask from the Day of the Dead, which were used in 1997 by sex workers to honor the people who had died from the AIDS epidemic. Next. All right, Edith, Steffen, and I, you met Edith last week, I think, edited an anthology on the development of the continuing bonds after 20 years. I think she did some of this, so I'll rush through. Here are the here are the themes that we found. Theme 1, continuing bonds are not individual, they are intersubjective. Intersubjective means a reality that is held by one or more conscious minds. Go to a football game, and what you call football is different than what we call football, but the intersubjectivity of the fans are the same in both places. They are all experiencing the same thing. They are knowing together. Next slide. It's intersubjective between the living person and the dead person. It's intersubjective among the survivors. This is at the AIDS epidemic, during the AIDS epidemic, two gay guys at a funeral. Just a personal story. My wife, we spent the first 10 years of our retirement before we moved down here. We spent it at the end of Cape Cod in Massachusetts, which is a large center of gay culture. We were the first, we were the only gay couple when we joined the Unitarian Universalist Church. I'm sorry, we're straight. I get confused about that sometimes. We were the only straight couple when we joined. There were 4 couples when we left, so we thought we'd form a caucus. The AIDS epidemic changed the gay community. It was no longer centered in the bathhouse. Suddenly, all that death and all of that suffering, they formed themselves into support groups. They became a different kind of community. One of the things that we did almost every month when we lived there is we made dessert for, we would cook a couple of batches of cookies or brownies or something for the AIDS support group that met once a month. These were people who supported people with AIDS, so that the continuing bonds is intersubjective in the social network. Next, this is the Kunming festival in China. It's kind of like Oban. It's more elaborate, but we don't have time to talk about that. You can look it up on Google if you want. Theme 2, next. Continuing bonds are central in the construction of meaning. Next, we know that meaning making is not an individual activity. It happens in social relationship. Most people, if you ask them about what does death mean, many of them will begin, well, I'm an Anglican and this is what we think, or I'm a Buddhist and this is what we think. In other words, we believe what we believe believing is part of our belonging. It is talk, and so how do we do it? Next, meaning making takes place in interpersonal relationships. Next, oh, I'm sorry, you're on the one I want to be on. Just stay there, I'll catch up. A bond's meaning then is an interaction between interior, interpersonal, communal, and cultural narratives by which individuals and community constructs meaning. Go to the one with the photograph. Bonds and meanings can be very complex and ambivalent. This is a statue by Augustus St. Gaudens, who is was a major American artist. It was commissioned by Henry Adams, who was an American literary guy. He was also the grandson of the second president of the United States. As a memorial to his wife, Marion Hopper Adams. She was called Clover by almost everyone who knew her. She committed suicide at the age of 42, swallowing chemicals she used in developing photographs. She was depressed. So have some of you had a friend or a relative with chronic depression? Look at this. This is not a person grieving. This is the person that's being grieved for. They're kind of there and they're not there. It's a difficult thing to describe. We can love them and yet we can never really know them because it's hard for us to get into the depression with them. That's what I was finding in Emily's paper when I was reading it this morning. It's in Rock Creek Cemetery in Washington, D.C., you can't stand away from it. You go through, it is surrounded by a big privet hedge. It's a very small area. There's a bench for you to sit on. St. Gaudens designed it so that you would have to look at her. I spent a half an hour there and continue to be blown away by it. Next one, scene 3. Continuing bonds raises questions in the truth or reality status of our interaction with that. I don't need to tell you about this. Matthew is leading the way in the philosophical stuff there. But the group over at Aalborg, the group over at Aalborg is also doing stuff. That's what philosophy is equipped to do, is to talk about what's truth, what's the ontological reality of these experiences. We make decisions about our life based on our experience with the dead, and yet we in the West do not have a good ontology of. That's what Edith, I think Edith said that as part of her presentation. The problem with the experience of presence that Edith investigated is that that we don't have a way of talking about that except parapsychology, which is simply trading one false certainty for another. We need to do a better job with that. We live in an age that privileges objective scientific knowledge, the logical positivism. I shouldn't have to explain that to this group. The history of 19th, keep going, one more. The history of 19th century spiritualism shows that scientific proof is a dead end. The spiritualists thought that They had two arguments. First of all, they thought that in communing with the dead spirits, they could bypass religious institutions and get in touch with the supernatural naturally. And the other thing they thought is that they could be scientific. They said that their being in contact with the dead in seances were like the recently invented telegram, that you can, it transcends space and time, it transcends space. And so they said it was scientific. One more. It ended in, keep going. It ended in charlatanism, charlatans stage shows. So the philosophical term about what the question is, the question of ontology. Keep going. I'm not really qualified to answer the question, but I'll give you some ways I think we can start to think. I believe this. We don't see things the way they are. We see things the way we are. Next. The distinction between knowing and knowing about, we don't have that distinction in English. In German, you can wissen for knowing about and kennengelernt for I know you. We had some friends who'd been married for 65 years. Naomi died and Jerry moved up to be near his daughter. I called him one day and I said, "How you doing?" He says, "Well, I talk to her all the time." And I said, "Oh, really? Do you hear her voice?" He says, "Nah, I just know what she would say." And then he gave me a couple of examples and he was right. And when he gave me the examples and I said, "You're right," I had a very brief sense of Naomi's presence. The sense of presence is not at all unusual. Let me see, where am I? I'm on the one that says Japan. Let's keep going. I'm running a little behind. Are some of you familiar with Howard Gardner's multiple intelligence? When I was a psychology major, we thought there was a thing called intelligence and that you could measure it. There's a very good book on that by Stephen Jay Gould called The Measure of Man, in which he ends up talking about his retarded son. We thought there was this thing called intelligence. And you know what, if the IQ test, you know what IQ tests are good at predicting? They're very good at predicting how you will do on IQ tests. They don't predict anything else. There's no such thing as grand mal intelligence. Gardner has multiple music, visual, spatial, verbal, linguistic, logical, mathematical, body, kinesthetic, interpersonal, naturalistic. There are lots of kinds of intelligences, and we need to use them all as we try to understand. Next. Theme 4. Continuing bonds are best understood within their cultural settings. That's especially important as we develop a model of grief that can be used cross-culturally. The Western model of grief cannot be used cross-culturally. If you use the concept of grief as presently defined by the psychologist, and try to use that to understand other cultures, you will make major misunderstandings. You can't do it. It's the Western theory. Go to the one with the picture. Cultural narratives can be cast at any level of abstractions. We're back to Piaget. This is the continuing bonds. This is heaven in the Precious Moments Memorial in Crothersville, Missouri. Do you have, they sell them in gift shops, Precious Moments statuettes. It's an entire theory. It's an entire a series of collective, little statues about this tall. They're gray and white, and they are all dedicated to the emotion of, "Oh, ain't that cute?" And this guy, who's made a lot of money selling these statues, did a whole chapel. This is heaven. You see the Golden Gate there, and the sign on the Golden Gate says, "No more crying here." And next to the Golden Gate are a set of crutches, child's crutches, that he put in there because he knew a little girl who had been crippled and she died. That is concrete operations. It is, on the other hand, you can get very abstract. Let me give you the most abstract one that I think you may be interested in. You know that Shakespeare sonnet that begins, shall I compare thee to a summer's day? Go down in, that's about continuing bonds. And every fair from fair sometimes declines by chance or nature's changing course untrimmed. But thy eternal summer shall not fade, nor shall death brag thou wanderest only in his shade, when in eternal lines to time there grows. The eternal lines are Shakespeare's understanding of his poetry. So long as men shall live and eyes can see, so long lives this, and this gives life to thee. Or in another sonnet, not marble nor gilded monuments of princes shall outlive this powerful rhyme, but you shall shine more bright in these contents than unswept stone besmeared by sluttish time. That guy could really write, couldn't he? Unswept stone besmeared by sluttish time. Cultures create the many ways we maintain continuing bonds. Next one. One of the first uses of photography was in continuing bonds with photographing dead. This young couple is that child is dead, and the young couple is sitting there. That's the only family portrait they will have, but they will keep that. Now, continuing bonds are being maintained by the new technology of social media. There's a large literature on social media, and it's just that every new technology is about connect. It has elements of it about connecting to that. I've lost his name now, but the guy who was Marconi's, the guy who invented radio. Marconi's major competitor for inventing the radio was quite convinced that by this new technology, he was able to talk to the dead, like they thought the dead talked through telegraph in the spiritualists. And so he got lost over there, and Marconi becomes the inventor of the radio. So it shows you continuing bonds can be harmful. Go to the picture. Yeah, next one. You know the phrase, they're together in heaven. Don't you like that? I don't know where this is. I found it on the internet. But when we look at this, we say there's a relationship that endures beyond death. And our feeling about that is that we feel that then we understand this because we feel, if you're lucky, in a relationship that transcends death. Next one. Continuing bonds are part of the larger culture. This woman is at the New York Trade Center Memorial, when the planes hit the building in New York City in 9/11. She's at the memorial. She comes to this collective memorial to express her deep personal grief. Next. Now, sometimes we reject meanings with bonds. The United States is currently going through a very interesting time. The Confederates we had a civil war in the 1800s, Abraham Lincoln, Robert E. Lee. You might have read about that. It's in some books. The monuments to the Civil War dead were not put up right after the Civil War. They were put up as Jim Crow laws were being erected. You know what I mean when I say Jim Crow laws? You read about. We've got real problems in our country because they're reintroducing Jim Crow laws, and at the same time, the conservatives, the white nationalists, are reintroducing Jim Crow laws. They are also resisting tearing down the monuments to the Confederate dead. Robert E. Lee wasn't a hero; he was a traitor. And so suddenly we are reevaluating in the United States the meaning of those monuments. If I leave Washington, D.C. to drive to Richmond, Virginia was the capital of the Confederacy. I drive on a highway that only got renamed a few months ago, and the highway is called the Jefferson Davis Highway. Jefferson Davis was the president of the Confederacy. So sometimes we have to change the continuing bonds that we as a culture have. And sometimes when they're problematic, we need to change the continuing bonds we have personally with those who were important to us. Next one. This is a new memorial. It is the lynching memorial in in Birmingham, Alabama, in which suddenly we're saying we need to remember this part. In the United States, we remember this part of our history. But of course, we learned how to do slavery from England. You know, if you take a look at the British Victorian period and all of that industrial expansion that was that was done with cotton and with it starting with cotton, which was by slavery. Go to the next one. This is the Vietnam Memorial that really unified my country. Suddenly, here were all the names of the guys who didn't get to march in parades when they came home from a stupid war that McNamara, who was Secretary of Defense, admitted later that that he knew they couldn't win. Next one, continuing bonds may also help us to understand these people with whom we share 95% of our DNA. Her name was Dorothy. She's a 33-year-old chimp who died of heart failure in Cameroon. Those chimps are a sanctuary. That means that they were traumatized, often kidnapped as children after their mothers had been killed and sometimes cut up for bushmeat after they have died. They have a culture too. Are any familiar with Franz de Waal? Wonderful stuff. He is a primatologist, and his thesis is that we can understand ourselves better if we understand chimpanzees and gorillas better. They share 98 point something percent of our DNA. They're more like us than we are. And the only difference is we have a developed verbal language. They have developed other kinds of languages. I think it's an incredibly interesting development in psychology and certainly in understanding human cognition. The book you might want to start with is The Age of Empathy, in which he talks about empathy among the chimps and its limitations, how it's used, how it functions in society. And the one that I really like is called The Bonobo and the Atheist, in which he says that we can understand religions not as something from the top that comes from God. Religions are a natural part of the chimpanzee and human psyche, because it grows out of the way we interact with each other. Well, how shall I conclude this? They said I spoke for an hour and I just about made it. Next one, the study of continuing bonds opens us up to a wide range of phenomena and in bereavement, including cultural phenomena. And the last slide. And it opens us up to the complexities of our relationship with others, both with our relationship with the living and our relationship with the dead. Sorry, that's the best I could do in an hour.